Hello, this is Beth Kelly with Close the Gap podcast. I would like to have this discussion with you tonight on how to help your child get organized and stay organized, part 2. Some kids have this appearance of being chronically disorganized, and they may look like they don't care, they may look like they're lazy, or they even appear that they just have an indifference about them. But parents, that can make us crazy. What it boils down to is this. Your child may be a disorganized organizer. What people don't see them struggling with is their level of anxiety, their frustration, their embarrassment, and how unfair, harsh consequences are for the chronically disorganized. These kids need to be shown, taught, and learn new strategies multiple times. They find it helpful. Why? Because they learn differently. Practice is key, no matter what organizational strategy that they use. And particularly when we're talking about kids that have learning differences. So let's get started with reviewing some of the strategies that we're going to talk about tonight. First, let's talk about metacognition. Can metacognition help with learning differences? Kids with learning differences. Can it help them learn? That's a good question. Kids need to make the transition from the I can't to the how can I stage. An article that I read says that kids need to be taught to think. They need to think about why they're stuck, what's frustrating them, what's holding them back. How can they get unstuck or be better thinkers? They need to think about how they process or think about thinking. That's what metacognition is. It's self-regulation to the degree of understanding what self-reflection is. Understanding their feelings, their emotions, their needs and behaviors that shape their ability to learn. It impacts how we learn, manage, and take on new experiences, challenges, and emotional setbacks. We know how our developing children can be emotional, but how do they handle that emotion? When we make decisions about our thought conversations, mental sequencing, and sounding board, planning out our actions. Kids and young adults need training and practice in a positive, motivating way. There are some studies that, according to this website, the reports teaching and developing metacognition strategies early on increases the child's resilience, and they're more successful in and out of school. Well, that's a goal for any parent. So why wouldn't strategies like this work? It's a different way of instruction. A statement made by a learning specialist was quoted as saying, "Getting into the habit of using metacognitive strategies early on helps the child or kid become more independent learners and bolsters self-advocacy skills." Well, anytime you increase a child's ability to self-advocate, you will see a child that has good skills for communication, and they have really good self-confidence. What is metacognition and how does it work? A learning coach was quoted as saying, in metacognition techniques, thinking about our thinking creates perspective. Perspective that leaves room for change. This example, a kid says, for example, I'll say, a kid says, the math test makes me anxious. So instead, maybe we need to encourage them to think about it this way. What about the math test makes me feel anxious, and what can I do about it? Is the second part. So teaching kids to ask questions and answer their questions for their own self-resilience and confidence building. That's where they become more self-aware. Their resilience increases, and so does their self-confidence. It helps kids figure out solutions to difficulties with assignments without letting the assignments overwhelm them as they begin to grasp these strategies of asking questions so they can figure out how to answer the question. These strategies work great for self-regulation, especially for kids that have ADHD, ADD, learning differences, and those that struggle to keep up. Metacognition techniques help quiet negative self-talk or self-doubt. How do we encourage metacognition? Metacognition is asking questions. So it might be an open-ended question. It might be a non-blaming question. For example, if kids' behaviors are interfering, they need to ask themselves or be asked this question: why do you think you got so upset when? Da 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 da. And ask the child to reflect on that and answer honestly. That way they can move into the solution phase rather than being stuck in the I can't. The next one is being solution focused. Encourage thinking about how they can use their understanding to change in the future. If they understand the concept of metacognition and these questions, they can ask the questions before difficulties arise. It's pre-planning. And then being process-oriented. Ask questions to help your kids get a better idea of how their thoughts process works. Would this work better than that? What do you think about this? This process will take time, so please be patient. Just by asking questions gets the metacognitive work internally. Your child's brain figures it out. And when they start to internalize their questions, they start thinking about how to get and attack a question and come up with a solution. If your child struggles to work through, say for example, a long paper, ask questions that help with them to tap into their metacognitive skills and try a different approach. Some questions you might ask might be like this: what do you think is making it hard for you to work on this paper right now? Let them reflect on that and answer honestly. What are some strategies that worked for you in the past? Do you think you could make it work here? Asking these questions, making them think about what they can do. Can you use those that worked for you in the past here? Or what can you do now? The more your child is able to understand their learning processes, the easier it is for them to figure out what works best for them. This is something that they can add to and grow over time and become independent thinkers. So getting organized, what does that look like? It's not a matter of trying harder. It's about trying differently. We can teach kids to tap into their organizer, their internal organizer. Each child is different, so do not make this a cookie cutter for every child. Every child is going to have their special shaped cookie cutter. You want to identify weak spots. What does your child find challenging? And start there. Tackle one at a time. Once a solution works and they can use it again and again and it works every time, they're going to be much happier with their results and move on from there. Then it becomes not a struggle, but something that they enjoy. And they may even think, gosh, I did it that time. Great job, good for you. Keep your organization simple and duplicatable, like using a planner or a calendar. Maybe your phone reminders will work. I personally like sticky notes. Whatever works for you. Finding what actually works and what's supposed to work are two different things. Find tools and strategies that work for you that can be tapped into every time, no matter what the lesson. Now, there are some tips that can help across the spectrum of getting organized. Number one, and I have 5 of these. So number 1 is write it down. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen and it's not going to get done. Number 2 is put key items in the same spot every time. So for example, your keys, put them in the same hook every time. Or your phone, put it in the phone holder. Or hook it into your charger. Well, what about your glasses? Try to put these items in the exact same spot every time you're done with them. Number 3, make easy to lose things bulky. So if you have a USB stick that is a micro stick, try putting a key fob on it or a paracord loop, something that makes it easier for you to find. Number 4, break tasks down into smaller steps or more manageable pieces that help you get things done. My grandmother used to say, you don't eat an elephant all at once. You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So break it down into smaller bites. And number 5, the simpler the better. My grandmother used to say, well, kiss. Keep it simple, silly. If you start feeling overwhelmed or out of control, just stop. Take a break. A breather. Go for a walk or a swim. Recollect yourself. Then ask yourself your sorting questions and lock into the thinker's strategies. So as we've gone over some of these strategies, I hope that these are helpful. If you have questions about my podcast, please contact me at closethegap.podcast@gmail.com.